Federal government and international partners conclude 2 weeks recovery and assessment mission in the Northeast.
Minister of Niger Delta Affairs directs contractors who receive payments to return to site or risk revocation of their contracts.
Federal Road Safety Corps partners with Lagos State Government on traffic management.
Climate change, the challenges ahead, and focus on Good Morning Nigeria.
From China to Brazil, United Kingdom, USA, down to Nigeria and Africa, viruses previously unknown to scientists are emerging. Ebola, Lassa fever, respiratory syndrome corona, MERS, Zika, and of course, avian influenza, otherwise known as bird flu.
Well, those infections are worsened by the effect of climate change factors such as El Nino. Now, in fact, the WHO, that's the World Health Organization, predicts possible increase in major global health-related emergencies this year, resulting from the impact of El Nino.
Indeed, Kingsley, who also reports that El Nino will induce severe drought, flooding, rains, and temperature rises, leading to food insecurity, acute water shortages, and disruption of health services.
But what is El Nino, you may ask? Now, weather experts say that it's a surge of heat periodically released from the Pacific Ocean, which affects global weather patterns. And no continent is spared from its impact.
Well, like other parts of the world, Nigeria started experiencing its impact with the severe flooding in 2012, which led to the loss of over 2.6 trillion naira to the unprecedented flood disaster, which ravaged about 30 states.
In addition to flooding, El Nino has also been identified as one of the causative factors that have negatively impacted on the lives and socio-economic activities of Nigerians, especially in 11 states of the Federation. Now, other hazards being witnessed in the country as a result of climate change include drought, rising sea level, as well as erosion.
And World Health Organization, WHO, predicts that the rainfall pattern this year will be unusually heavy and may lead to serious flooding, as well as major outbreaks of diseases like ailments like malaria, cholera, and Rift Valley fever. That's, of course, in eastern part of Africa. Now, the WHO fact-finding sheet states that between 2030 and 2050, climate change is expected to cause approximately 250,000 additional deaths per year from malnutrition, malaria, diarrhea, and heat stress, with direct damage costs estimated at between $2 to $4 billion per year by 2030.
Now, yeah, what policies should Nigeria put in place to cushion the effect of climate change? And what should be done to mitigate the harmful effects of El Nino, particularly in the rural areas?
And on the part of individual Nigerians, what should they begin to do to avoid the escalating negative health impact of resulting, of course, from El Nino? These are some of the questions we intend to seek answers to from our guests on today's program. I am Claire Delabu Abdulrazak. As usual, the pleasure is ours having you join us today, Monday, the first day of the working week.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo, and I also join Claire in welcoming you to this edition, which as usual is live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. In the course of the program, we'll have our complimentary segments, newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, and others. We're going over to the newsroom now, and here is Laure Bala Hassan with the news. Hi, Laure.
Hi, Kingsley. Good morning and welcome to the news. The federal government, World Bank, European Union and the United Nations have concluded a 2-week recovery and assessment mission in the northeastern states ravaged by insurgency as part of the ongoing Recovery and Peace Building Assessment RPBA program. Led by the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Internally Displaced Persons, Dr. Miriam Masha, the Recovery and Assessment team visited Adamawa, Taraba, Gombe, Bauchi, Borno and Yobe states, during which the team actively engaged with state governors, decision makers as well as top government functionaries, civil society organizations, traditional rulers, the internally displaced persons, IDPs among others. The team also visited several camps and resettlement centers for the IDPs in different states, as well as insurgency-ravaged public institutions like hospitals, markets, and military formations. The officials gained first-hand knowledge of human and physical conditions in the camps and resettlement centers, affording them the opportunity to empathize with the people, and also reassured them of the commitment of the Buhari administration towards addressing their challenges. The field visit by the technical and humanitarian experts from these critical global institutions primarily focused on validating the processes through which data are to be collected and how to develop internationally acceptable mechanisms to maintain contact with focal points in all the states. Minister of Niger Delta Affairs, Osani Ogoro Osani, has directed contractors who received payment between October and December 2015 to return to site or risk revocation of their contracts. Isaac Nkuma reports that the minister stated this when he visited the ministry's skills acquisition projects in Imo State.
I have seen clearly that I am facing frustration. The lot that has to do with the sports complex and the road has been mobilized, and what we tend to see is not reasonably justified by how much money the contractor has got. And so we think that the contractors should either return to site or refund the money so they pay other people who can do the job, or have the alternative of defending themselves elsewhere.
Meanwhile, Special Advisor to the President on Niger Delta Affairs and Presidential Coordinator on Amnesty Program, Brigadier General Paul Boro, says the program is on course and has significantly helped in sustaining peace in the Niger Delta region. The coordinator urges the public to disregard misleading information by disgruntled persons, which is geared towards destabilizing the process of sustainable reintegration of ex-agitators into the civil society. Brigadier General Paul Boro, in his briefing to the media on the 2015 budget status report, says the office followed due process in executing all its programs in the 2015 budget allocation, paid all stipends and fees as well as training allowances owed beneficiaries by the previous administration from 2013 to 2015. This, he said, was achieved in 5 months on assumption of office. Brigadier General Boro says the Amnesty Office returned over 400 million naira unspent funds in the 2015 budget to the National Treasury. The Federal Road Safety Corps, FRSC, and the Lagos State Government have strengthened partnership on traffic management with a view to creating safer road environment in the state. This is part of the resolutions reached at the interactive session between the Corps Marshal of the FRSC, Boboye Oyeyemi, and the Lagos State Commissioner for Transport, Dr. Ekundayo Omoboriola, at the Lagos State Secretariat, Alausa.
I'm ready for full support for us to let's change the face of traffic situation in Nigeria, and Lagos is key towards it. The last market officials too, we need to train them on how to verify driver's license, how to verify their registration.
The Catholic Bishops' Conference of Nigeria first plenary meeting for 2016 has opened in Abuja with a call on Nigerians to support President Buhari's administration change mantra for a better Nigeria. Daniel Nelson reports President of the Bishops' Conference and Archbishop of Jos Diocese, Most Reverend Ignatius Kaigama, are saying Nigerians must support the fight against corruption and engage in patriotic acts.
As there seems to be a general reawakening of patriotic consciousness today, we must work for the good of our children, our youth, generation yet unborn, and indeed for all Nigerians and Nigeria. We need to think positively.
We invite all our religious leaders to continue steadfastly in praying for our dear country and to pray earnestly for our leaders, that we should truly return to the path of righteousness and change from our evil ways.
And still on religious matters, Nigerians have been advised to rise up and promote integrity, accountability, a corrupt-free society, and to fear God in whatever they do for a better Nigeria. The advice was given at an interdenominational divine service organized by the Christian Association of Nigeria, Lagos chapter.
It's excellent. I have told you this. I think the war against corruption is excellent so far. But I think we can help government by changing our own attitude to what we currently do.
Now that the presidency is looking at it and saying that the National Assembly did not in any way want to cover up for any shortcomings.
And that's the news. It's now back to Claire and Kingsley for the continuation of Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much there, Larry Bala Hassan, for the news. We're taking a short break now, and thereafter it will be time for our business segment.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Time to talk business now. And Accountant General of the Federation says the TSA is the best public finance management strategy for Nigeria in line with present realities. We have details with Leah Khartoum Babatunde.
Hello and welcome to Good Morning Nigeria Business News. The implementation of the Treasury Single Account TSA, which started 4 years ago, now has 726 ministries, departments and agencies, NTAs, in its fold, translating to about 98%. This, however, is not without its challenges, as a technological tool of operation is now being overstretched with the influx. Accountant General of the Federation, Ahmed Idris, says like any new idea, the TSAs is only a passing phase.
The problem is not really from the agencies, but from the system, and we are trying to clear the issues. More so, even though they are insignificant, but we will all bring them on board.
It is reported that before the full implementation of the TSA, federal government agencies operated about 20,000 accounts with commercial banks, some of which were not fully documented. The AGF, while itemizing reasons for adoption of TSA, said that the need to stem financial hemorrhage and plug all loopholes occasioned the government's decision to implement the scheme.
We will all share experiences and share ideas on TSA and see, based on the model we've adopted, how can we fast track it? How can we take efficiency in terms of public finance management? How can we ensure prudence and economy? How can we ensure utilization of scarce resources, particularly now that the revenue accruing to government at all levels, the 3 tiers of government, have gone down drastically. So
the TSA will also address expenditure occasioned by unnecessary accumulation of idle funds in commercial banks.
Unlike before the implementation of the TSA, federal government borrows a lot of money from the central bank by ways and means, and that has drastically been reduced from over 100 billion to less than 30 billion now. And we have other challenges in the process of the implementation. For example, there's need for infrastructural enhancement, which is also being addressed.
Now investors in the Nigerian Stock Exchange heaved a sigh of relief in the weekend on Friday, the 12th of February 2016, as equities consolidated gains at the close of the week. Let's take a look at a graphic summary of latest figures from the NSE. And finally, in the press briefing at the headquarters in Washington, IMF spokesman Gary Rice confirmed that the current managing director was the only candidate at the conclusion of the 3-week period during which nominations for a new director could be made. The period for submitting nominations for the position of the next managing director closed on Wednesday, February 10. One candidate, the current managing director, Christian Lagarde, has been nominated. He said the board will now work in line with the process described in its decision of January 20, including meetings between the candidate, Madame Lagarde, and executive directors. The board's goal is to complete the selection process as soon as possible. And in other news, he reiterated IMF's concern regarding Ukraine. The whole issue of governance and anti-corruption has been a central part of the IMF's program objectives in that country. He added that without a substantial new effort to invigorate these government reforms and fight corruption, it was hard to have an enabling environment in place where the IMF program could continue and be successful. He confirmed that Ukraine had made some progress. And that is business news this morning. Thanks for watching.
Thank you very much, dear Alia Katung Babatunde, for the business package. Now it's time for us to take a look at the headlines into these newspapers.
And Bayo Atoyebe, a regular newspaper reviewer, is joined us. Thank you very much, Bayo, for coming. I hope you had a stress-free weekend.
Yes, I did, Claire. Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, we begin with the Nation newspaper, and it has the lead story. EFCC to quit top lawyer over £22.5 million Abuja loot. And it has a rider uncertainty over stolen $400 million, with quite a number of stories on the front page. But just below the picture story, Boko Haram fighters trained in Somalia, says President. Details of that, it's on page 6. Mohammed seeks international coalition against terrorism. And the picture story there, all for St. Valentine's Day, an army of people with disability at Valentine's Day, organized by, of course, one of the honorable members in Ibadan yesterday. Now, Dixon begins second term. It's trending on the right-hand column there, and Sterling to buy Keystone Bank. Now, just above the masthead, trending stories, $2.1 billion scam. Those returning loot likely to get pardon. It's on page 8. Senate to pass budget 2016 by March 31st, says Ndume. And parishioners, PDP Ohaneze forced Mbaka's transfer. Notorious headsmen, not Nigerians, says IG Arase. And OPEC keen to end all glut, says Kachuku. It's on page 6.
The Daily Trust is next for us. Daily Trust has as its lead story, budget. That's the kicker. Southwest gets lion's share of projects. And above that, there are two other stories. Somali president, Boko Haram trained in my country. Details of that can be found on page 4. And banks issue forex to importers of banned items. Banks issue forex to importers of banned items. Details of that can be found also on page 21. And just below the photograph on the front page is a headline, Senate cautions northern governors on Saudi loan. Details on page 6. Bio.
Yes, let's quickly go to the issue on insurgency. The president of Somalia has confirmed the suspicion that the insurgency in Nigeria has international dimensions, particularly with the revelation that they were trained in the eastern Somalia. Also talking about corruption, there have been some waves now. The Professor Issa Sage, who is a member of the Presidential Anti-Corruption Advisory Committee, has revealed that there have been very bold initiatives by people in returning alleged stolen funds in the ambit of the 2.1 billion arms saga. And he has also hinted that those who make such returns may possibly get a soft landing. He, however, declined to say how much has been so far returned. But the EFCC has now directed its radar on NAMA, the Aviation Airspace Management Agency. A recent revelation with the publications today indicate that about 3.2 billion was found in the account of one of the managers, and this one is the top manager of the NAMA. Another officer also has 700 million found in his personal account. This is the AGM manager for ICT. And they said also 500 million was found in the account of the general manager procurement. And all these have been trailed by the EFCC, and the officers are having those accounts frozen and some properties also sealed as part of the investigation. But the Catholic Bishops' Conference held a meeting, and they gave two strong positions. They said that the twin evil and war against insurgency and corruption deserve the support of every Nigerian. But they also said that at their 2016 Catholic Bishop Conference that they called on the government to use force, not to use force and security only. Other actions should also be considered to win the war. The president of the Bishops' Conference, Bishop Kaigama, also counseled that religion and tribe has been one of the bane of the nation, which undermines credibility of people being given service.
All right, Bayo, thank you very much there. Let's continue with the headlines for this day newspaper. Above the name flag of this day, there are two economic stories. Why the president is reluctant to back devaluation. That's one of the headlines, but it has the following riders. CBN may invite EFCC to probe allegations of round tripping, and IMF relaxes stance as more countries adopt capital controls. And lower commodity prices keep inflation stable at 9.6%. Those are the economic stories on the front page. Then you have the lead story. APC pressure mounts on Buhari to sack heads of parastatals. And despite enabling laws, that's the rider, 35 agency chiefs may be forced out.
Okay, and Vanguard leads with the report. Saudi loan, Senate cautions Sarewa governors. Three riders follow. Says move illegal, governors on their own. Urges IDB not to release funds to them. And why we went to Saudi Arabia, Governor Shetima. The lead story there, Saudi loan, Senate cautions Arewa governors. And just below the masthead, $2.1 billion arms probe, another general arrested. It's on page 9. And UK lawmakers to quiz police chief over bribe on Ibori's case. And coming down, you find a picture story that's the governor of Bayelsa State, Sireka Dixon, been sworn in by the Chief Justice of Bayelsa State. That's for his second term in office. Of course, with him is his wife, Rachel. Lassa fever victim dies in Ogun. And $200 million Halliburton bribe fine paid directly into CBN. That's coming from Dodo. The details of that story you can find on page 9. Bio. And just before I hand over to you, I have this Daily Sun. Of course, Daily Sun leads with a story. Arms probe, ex-DMI, General Wiwa, others arrested. And Senate will pass 2016 budget before March 31st in Jume. INEC drags Anduba, Odwa, others to Supreme Court. Now, that's, of course, those are the main stories trending. And the picture story there, you find the Vice Chairman Board of Trustees, Murtala Mohammed Foundation, Mrs. Ajoke Mohammed, and Mrs. Aisha Mohammed Oyebode, with students of Government Junior Secondary School Asokoro during the 40th Murtala Mohammed Memorial Lecture in Abuja.
Well, there is conflicting report about the national budget. A newspaper is reporting that some members of the National Assembly that the 25th February deadline is still feasible. But the Senate leader, Senator Ali Ndume, has clearly said that by the Senate, the National Assembly, hope to complete all the scrutiny with the budget by March 31st. There shouldn't be any alarm because the 2015 budget has had its lifespan expanded and it will be ending by 31st of March. So if they are finishing by 31st of March, it will be falling to, quite in queue with the end of the 2015 budget. But there are some human interest stories that I like to draw attention to. You recall that during the last presidential campaign, an old woman, 95-year-old woman, Hajia Fati Koko, she is popularly known as Metala Tara. Unfortunately, she died. She was the woman who waited 7 hours for President Muhammad Buhari, when he was then the APC candidate, to deliver her contribution of 1 million to the president's vote. The president has described the deceased as a woman with a good heart who stood by her convictions and gave sacrificially. It is not on record that she made any demand for her contributions. I think the APC should honor that woman, probably by naming their headquarters after Hajia Fati Koko, as is being speculated elsewhere. There is also human interest story that relates to the topic that was discussed on this program some days ago, prostate cancer and cervical cancer. Now, he said that a new urine test has been created that can detect and is very effective for prostate cancer. So it substitutes the cumbersome process of PSA that requires you to give blood and have to wait for days. It is said that there's about 1.1 million cases in the year 2012 of prostate cancer. And by way of percentages, 8% of them are prostate cancer, and 15% are usually very devastating. The other human interest story that I like to point out is that a man who was supposed to be a lunatic had been monitored for over 2 weeks, and when he was arrested, they found on him 22 ATM cards, 2 telephones and 1 power pack. And within that period, he has made 700 transactions and withdrawals. And when they investigated and chat with him, he would sound very coherent and at times also go off court. So he has been arrested by SARS and he's to undergo psychiatry and other investigations. The other one is about a letter written by robbers to residents of Nyanya Karu, local government in Nasarawa. They say this is to inform landlords, landladies, tenants, and occupiers that the big boys will be visiting your area. For your preparation, please take note. Landlord, landlady, 500,000. Keep them ready for us. Caretaker, 200,000. Tenants with Jeep, 500,000. People with 2 cars, 300,000. A tenant with 10 children, 300,000. Tenants with 1 child, 50,000. Tenants with no work, pack and go back to your village. You have no use for us. And they say they mean it. The DPO in Karu has confirmed this, and also the district head has confirmed this. The police is also aware of this, and I'm sure they will need this in the board.
That's the audacity of robbers. Certainly, I think they have exposed themselves, and we expect the security agencies to be on their trail so that they get them arrested. That's a story from the front page of this day newspaper. Ibori trial. That's the kicker. British MPs to grill London Met police chief over bribery claims. That's the story there. Yeah, a number of other stories inside the pages of the papers. IPOB, that's the Independent Peoples of Biafra, or something they say they would not be carrying arms. That's to find out inside. They'll be bearing arms now to defend themselves. That's an inside page story in Daily Trust. And then there are also reactions to The vice chancellors also were removed over the weekend of the newly established 13 of them, including the National Open University, by the way. Yes. There are also reactions to that. You have to find them in the inside pages of Daily Trust.
In fact, the civil society group has said it should be the duty of the governing board to remove vice chancellors, and so they are raising concerns about that. The other one is that the World Greeting Cards Association says that about 1.2 billion Valentine cards are sold annually, and is the second highest thing after Christmas cards. Ironically, the basis of Valentine celebration is now being abused. It has its genesis in pagan Roman ceremonies. British and France ceremonies also have their own, which represented the season where birds were meeting. But the concern here is now that even the Catholic Church had Pope John Paul VI expel it from the Catholic calendar because it is being abused. And those who championed it, there have been several Valentines, by the way. One of them was specifically punished for continuing to marry people secretly. And because
I wish we were here on Friday.
Well, the point is, Valentine is gone. That's it was yesterday.
Yes.
And there's, of course, you now know there's commerce around it. So it isn't just the idea of the ceremony itself. It's now become an item on the social calendar, year round. So
you recall the question Claire asked some time ago, that men often jettison their boyfriends in December?
Yes.
I'm told to round up.
Valentine is the point to reconcile.
I'm told to round up. Thank you.
But it's all vanity.
Well, yesterday was Sunday. I mean, there are all kinds of jokes flying around. Some guy said, look, he was going to attend 3 services, first service, second service, third service, and then a vestry meeting, so he probably will not have the time, to be out. But yeah, I tell you, people, would like to thank you for being with us on the program this morning. We'll see you
Thank you for having me, as always.
Okay.
All right, this is Good Morning Nigeria, and we're watching you live from here at the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll be right back.
We have always lived together as brothers and sisters. Though we speak different languages and celebrate different cultures, we were still one Nigeria. There was no bombing, there was no kidnapping, and our children were not cultists. Now, we suspect one another as there are spreads of cultism, bombing, and kidnapping. How long shall this go on? Terrorism is alien, kidnapping is criminal, cultism is barbaric. Nigeria is a blessed country. Support the Nigeria police and the fight against terrorism, kidnapping, and cultism. Always inform the police of any incident around you. Say something when you suspect something.
Remember, we all have a stake in building a crime-free Nigeria of our dream.
This message is from the Nigeria Police Force.
All right, let's start our conversation on climate change and the impact of El Nino. Now, weather experts say most of the emerging new diseases we talked about earlier on during the banter between Kinsley and I, like Ebola, Zika, and MERS, worsened by climate change factors, of course, such as El Nino. We've told you what El Nino is, kind of a surge of heat, rising from the Pacific Ocean. Now, in fact, the severe flooding and the drought experienced in parts of the world last year were linked to, of course, activities of El Nino. So how does it affect Nigeria, and what can Nigeria do to mitigate the impact of this impending climatic factor? Timothy Yusuf gives us an insight in this background report.
Over the last 50 years, human activities, particularly the burning of fossil fuels, have released huge quantities of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. The atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide has increased by more than 30% since pre-industrial times, thereby trapping more heat in the lower atmosphere. Consequently, the resulting changes in global climate has brought about risk to health. Studies show that Nigeria is experiencing adverse climatic conditions with negative impact on the welfare of millions of people. For instance, persistent droughts and flooding, Off-season rains and dry spells have sent cropping seasons out of orbit, especially in a country dependent on a rain-fed agriculture like Nigeria. Alarm bells have been ringing with lakes drying up and a reduction in river flow in the arid and semi-arid regions. The result, therefore, is reduced water supplies for use in agriculture and hydropower generation, among others. The main suspect for all this havoc today is climate change. Already assessments indicate that Africa, including Nigeria, will be worst hit by the effects of climate change. A study commissioned by the World Bank in 2007 also says that Nigeria accounts for roughly 1/6 of the worldwide gas flaring, spewing some 400 million tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. However, a World Bank survey lists Nigeria and 15 other oil producers as countries that have progressively reduced gas flaring. Experts are therefore calling for urgent attention about the country's global warming and climate change challenges.
Timothy Yusuf, thank you very much there for that background report. We have a number of guests to discuss this topic this morning here in the Abuja studios as well as at remote locations. First, let's at this time welcome Alhaji Ibrahim Usman Jibril, is the Honorable Minister of State Environment. Honorable Minister, it's our pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you and good morning, Nigeria.
And we also have in the studio Dr. John Osanwa, is a very familiar face. He is a climate change expert, also a professor of environmental law and policy, former editor of American Journal of Law and Medicine, a member of the Society for Occupational Safety and Environmental Health. Dr. Osanwa, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
All right, still with us in the Abuja studios, we have Mr. Joseph Alozie, is General Manager Climate Change NIMET. He's here representing the Director General and CEO of NIMET, Dr. Anthony Anuforom, who is unavoidably absent from the program this morning. Mr. Alozie, it's our pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigeria.
Gentlemen, we are also being joined from our Benin Network studio by Dr. Newton Jibuno, an environmentalist, a very known face. Dr. Jibuno, thank you very much for joining us.
The community, but the entire country have become aware of the problem. So we...
All right, and then from our Sokoto studios, we have Dr. Ayuba Danasabe Umar. He is an environmentalist as well. Dr. Umar, it's our pleasure to have you on the program. All right, gentlemen, as I said, we have Sokoto, we have Benin Network Center, and then we have three guests with us in the Abuja studios. Let's begin with the Honorable Minister of State Environment. Honorable Minister of State, how prepared is Nigeria to deal with the rising impact of climate change against, of course, the background of the prediction of worse effects of El Nino?
Thank you very much. I would say that Nigeria is prepared to deal with the effect of climate change. Recall that at the end of last year, there was the Paris Conference of the Parties, known as COP21, and Nigeria was represented at the highest level by no less a person than the President of the Federal Republic. And throughout the period of those negotiations, the Minister of Environment, Amina Mohammed, was fully involved in the negotiation leading to the agreement that were reached at the Paris Conference. So here at home, the Minister of Environment is determined and willing to take a bold initiative. There are some organs that are already in place, particularly some of the agencies like the Great Green Wall. If you look at the agency of the Great Green Wall, it is charged with the responsibility of arresting the desert encroachment, particularly in the northern parts of the country. There are 11 frontline states that are prone to the effects of climate change, mainly through desertification. This Great Green Wall is an initiative of the African Union, and it covers 11 countries in the sub-Saharan Africa. and Nigeria has 11 frontline states. Apart from that agency, there are other organizations and departments within the Ministry of Environment, particularly the Coastal Erosion and Coastal Management Department. The department is charged with the responsibility of looking at the effects of coastal erosion, sea level rise, and finding a way to remediate and arrest the disastrous consequences of climate change. So on the policy framework, there are enough policies put in place by the federal government through the Federal Ministry of Environment to attack and mitigate the issues of climate change. Other activities within the Ministry of Environment, remember this is a ministry that is having about 6 technical departments, apart from the agencies that are involved in regulation, environmental regulations. So on this note, I would say that we are fully prepared, and with the new team in the Ministry of Environment, headed by the Minister of Environment and my humble self, we are more than ready to tackle the effect of climate change, because we know that Nigeria is unique. Effects of climate change are felt at every side of the country. In the south, you have coastal erosion and sea level rise. In the north, you are attacked by the desert encroachment. In the central part of the country, you have a lot of flooding. Recall the 2012 flooding that devastated the entire north central parts of the country and other southern parts of the country. So with these consequences, the government cannot afford to fold its hand and just watch or lament. And that is why the Ministry of Environment is now more proactive and putting all the agencies as well as the technical department to arrest this issue and mitigate it.
All right, Honorable Minister, thank you for your opening remarks. We'll come back to you. But let's get to Mr. Alozie, who is, of course, the General Manager, Climate Change, NIMET. Mr. Alozie, the weather, particularly this year, has been quite warm. Sometimes it gets to us, high as 36 degrees and all that in parts of the country. We've heard of El Nino, prediction. What has that got to do with, with us? What is El Nino, and then what are the predictions from NIMET?
Thank you. El Nino, as the word goes, or phrase goes, is an effect of the variation of what we record as the temperature of the sea over off the coast of Peru in the tropical Pacific Ocean. And over the years, we have noted that the interaction between the sea and the atmosphere, which controls the weather in what is called ENSO phenomena, affects the weather in West Africa, particularly around the Sahel, which borders, in which the northern part of the country is included. And it brings a lot of significant changes in the weather in the country, not northern parts, places from, let's say, River Niger at Lokoja going up. Some of these include late onset of the rainy season. We have observed that in any year or period, maybe for the current it's now 2 years, and it's recorded as the worst case of El Nino in a long time now. There was the 1972-73 case, and 1997-1998 case. 2015 and 2016 is on record as the worst case of El Nino. I use the word case, or the phrase word case, because what it brings to our area is not good. We have reduced rainfall, we have late onset of the rains and early cessation of the rains. And if you have a late onset of the rain and early cessation of the rains, we have a shorter length of the season, and this puts a lot of pressure on farmers, for instance, because they are now forced to choose seed variety to plant. And There is also another serious matter in El Nino effect in Nigeria, in northern Nigeria, which is what we call dry spell. Dry spell is a period of about 10 days or more without rainfall. And this is coming shortly after the rains have started and established, and the farmers had gone to plant their crops. Suddenly the rain ceases. This is very devastating for crops that are at growing stage, you know, the initial growing stage. And what we do in NIMET is, through the instrument of some of our products, advise users, all users, particularly those whose activities are climate and weather sensitive, to listen to us and take good advice. Because if you don't know, you see the first rain, for instance, we call it first rain, and you go and plant.
What makes this one particularly unusual? Like you said, we've had it before. It's been there. It's been causing flooding. What makes this particular? Because there's been warning from WHO. There's been warning from AU. There's also been predictions from NIMET. So what makes this particular one unusual?
The sea surface temperature departure, which defines how the El Nino impact will be, is highest in this current one. We have had situations of plus 2.2 difference between the current sea surface temperature and a long-term average, 2.2 and above. And it's not been like this before now. The worst before now was in 1997, 1998, which was very bad for many parts of the country. And let me also say that just as it has such shorter rainfall season for us, in other climes, they do have a lot of flooding. So the effect differs from one place to the other. So in 2016, like what we are seeing since December 2015, one of the effects of a strong El Nino like we're having now is a drier than normal condition. Strong harmattan. If you notice, since November last year, when the harmattan came, it has remained so strong. In Abuja here, we have a lot of dust in suspension, and you can imagine the cumulative, even in air transportation alone, how much flights have been cancelled, suspended, or delayed. A lot of them, and the economic consequences.
Okay, Mr. Alozie, we'll come back to you. Let's get to Dr. John Osonwa before we go over to Sokoto. El Nino, I mean, if it's the culprit, as it were, in all the things that we are saying, what is it that triggers the El Nino phenomenon? Do we know what triggers it? And then, for how long does the phenomenon itself last?
Yeah, El Nino is a seasonal phenomenon. Comes every few years, 5, 6 years. As he rightly said, it comes out of the Pacific region, flowing north towards America, and also eastward toward Africa. The key trigger for El Nino is warmer sea temperatures. When the ocean temperature rises, it releases more moisture into the atmosphere, and when you have excess moisture, that comes back in some cases as snow, as rain. But when that warm temperature hits land, it leads to desertification. And that is why in some cases you see more rain and snow. In some cases you see drier effects. The problem we have is that climate change is making everything worse. El Nino has always been there. It's a seasonal cycle. In the US, we've been familiar with El Nino for 20, 30 years. It comes and goes. And because we know it's a seasonal cycle, we prepare for it. But what we're finding now is, because of climate change, the impact of El Nino is greater in all regions of the world. If you look at California, we're having the worst drought that we've ever had since what we call the Dust Bowl back in the 1930s. Crops are failing. You look at Ethiopia. Ethiopia is going through the worst drought in 50 years. You look at Nigeria specifically. Desertification is becoming more widespread. The desert is encroaching into Nigeria at the rate of about half a kilometer every year. You look at Lake Chad. Lake Chad used to be about 25,000 square kilometers. Now it has shrunk by 90%. It's only about 2,000 square kilometers. So all these things affect the way we live. Crop failures, but for me, the most significant impact in Nigeria is the relationship between desertification and insecurity. A lot of people have not drawn the connection between increased Fulani herdsmen clashing with crop farmers in the south. As far south as Abia State, my state, we're having more clashes. Why are we having clashes? Because the grazing lands in the north have become desertified in most cases. At any given time, we have about 20 million cattle in Nigeria. There's not enough grazing land in the north to feed all that cattle. Then, because of the impact on rivers and lakes, they are drying up. Even drinking water is a problem for humans and for animals. So we have this becoming a threat multiplier in the, when it deals with food security, when it deals with human security, and also how we manage the overall security of the nation. So it's a big problem, and we really need to do more. The Great Green Wall is a wonderful effort, but the only problem is it only covers about 2% of Nigeria's land mass. Nigeria has almost 1 million square kilometers. Great Green Wall is a band of vegetation about 15 kilometers wide that stretches from one end of Nigeria to the other. So if you do the math, it's only about 15,000 square kilometers. So it would not be enough to contain what we're seeing in the south in terms of erosion, what we're seeing in the middle belt in terms of flooding, and even in the north itself. So we need to do more. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about, some of the programs and initiatives that we want to partner with government to do this year.
All right, let's get to Sokoto, Dr. Dan Asabe Omar, who's an environmentalist. Of course, Dr. Omar, you've listened to the interpretations of El Nino and its impact, but let's get down to the basis where, of course, the farmer, like everyone here has said, may be the worst hit or affected by impacts of El Nino. How does this impact on the region, on the ecosystem in the northern part of the country?
Yeah, really. It does, just like the previous speakers made mention of. Now, once there is sort of some seasonal changes, so to say, that affects the amount of rainfall that comes into an area, it ultimately will hit seriously on their agricultural production processes. And so ultimately, since our country, Nigeria, particularly in the northwest, I mean in the northern parts of the country, is so dependent on rain-fed agriculture, if seasonal changes have affected the amount of rainfall that comes in, then definitely the amount of food to be produced will be grossly reduced. Ultimately, it will affect their socio-economic status. That is where the issue of security comes in the various facets. If a community or a society or a country doesn't have enough food to eat, what happens? There will be quarrels here and there. If, for any reason, water is inadequate for both their animals, their agricultural production processes, and so on, you discover that there will be losses all over. And the essence of any government or state is to see to the improvement of, say, the quality of lives of its citizens. But if this natural phenomenon has affected the entire country or state, then it becomes ultimately the responsibility of the state, so to say the country, to devise policies, as it were, and initiatives, and make sure that adequate funding, if the need arises, be given so that these things can be mitigated as appropriate.
Dr. Omar, thank you very much. Earlier, the Honorable Minister of State for Environment indicated the number of policy measures that the government has in place, and of course he will speak to these policy measures in greater detail. But some of the very well-known ones include, of course, the Great Green Wall. From Sokoto, where you are, do you see, what is your evaluation of the Great Green Wall project? Are we seeing rapid planting? Are we also expanding the bandwidth, if you like now, of the coverage area of the Great Green Wall?
Sokoto State, definitely the GGW is trying its best. And I am on board, on seeing the actual work they do in the various areas targeted to the tree planting issue. You know, the GGW, as it was, it has come on board. It's actually doing a lot of work in these areas. And I think if they maintain it and at the same time people are being sensitized to actually understand the effect of their activities on the immediate environment, I think we will go in a long way to reducing or mitigating the effects of some of these challenges we have environmentally in this state and other states of the Federation.
All right, and we now join Dr. Newton Jubono from our Benin Network Center. Dr. Jubono, thank you once again for joining in the conversation. You've listened. Let's get your perspective about what this whole El Nino phenomenon is all about and how probably it will affect the southern part of the country, of course, where agricultural activity is, the mainstay.
Well, unfortunately, I didn't follow the conversation coming from your distinguished panel, but so I don't know how much they have said. But since I don't want to repeat those things that are being debated at the moment, let me state here that the effect, what is being done now by the Great Green Wall Project is something close to what we predicted or what we had suggested some 20, 30 years ago. We have to get away from the normal ceremonial tree planting mitigation that has been going on for so long without yielding any positive results. Until we get down to a bottom-up arrangement, making some of these tree planting projects to become a community-owned project, we will not get this whole issue resolved. We're saying this because of the El Nino issue that the El Nino has been there for a long time. And when that issue started, we knew that tree planting was then the major issue. So we have to get away from that ceremonial issues and get down to getting the communities to, because as we speak, migration is taking place. If and when the Fulanis are not able to find solution, not able to find grazing fields for their 20, 30 million animal heads, what do they do? Where do they go to? They migrate. And like was mentioned earlier on, migration comes with security problem. Then of course, the food production aspect coming to the question you've just asked. The desertification is traveling so fast to a point where even here in the south, we are feeling it. In the last couple of weeks, it's been dust everywhere. And I've been telling people that all this, the dust is coming all the way from the Sahara. And until that issue is contained where it is coming from, then we will continue. And with the dust now reaching the southern part of the country, making the rivers to shrink, making agricultural production very difficult. The yield last year, for instance, was 25% less the year before. So we don't know what this year's yield is going to be like. And once you have that food security, once you have that kind of problem, then we are going to continue debating this and talking about it this way. So something has to be done. Something has to be something that will involve the communities and let them own. Because if we go on like we have been doing, planting trees, the trees we planted 20, 30 years ago would have become forests by now. But that notwithstanding, we had 37, 38% forest cover in Nigeria at independence. Do you know what it is today? It's less than 7%. So until we restore those mitigating issues, we will continue to to talk about it like this and do very little or achieve very little.
Dr. Newton Jibono, thank you very much. The issue of desert encroachment was so well established by Dr. Umar in Sokoto, but we're also looking at other aspects where this El Nino, might of course impact negatively in our country. We understand that it's been there quite all right, as everyone has indicated, but the particular warning says the effect will be severe. So on the agricultural produce, what do we need to do? What might be the impact in terms of food security in the country?
Like I mentioned earlier on, the whole fertile agricultural lands we have, particularly in the south, is becoming dust. And you can plant and get virtually no yield from land that is suffering from a lot of degradation. The lands have been degraded. There's a lot of degradation going on all over the southern part of the country. Not to talk about the north, where this whole desertification is coming from. Let me also explain something between desert encroachment and desertification, because some of us in the south tend to misconstrue the issue of, some of them, sometimes we want to say, we don't have desert in the south. But when you have encroachment, it means that the dust, the sand dunes that is being carried by the storm from the north, encroaching almost half a kilometer every year. Once it settles, what comes after that settlement is desertification, and that is the dust. It travels with the air, you don't see it. And it travels sometimes as far as thousands of miles away from where it's originated from. And that is what we are experiencing in the south. So sometimes for us to stay in the south and say we don't have desert, we are just playing with fire. Because today, if you go all over the southern part of the country, you will see the effect desertification is having on lands, on rivers, on canals, and on lakes. They are all drying up. And if the prediction we are getting, mind you, we don't have any early warning system here. We are using the ones being provided from other nations. But if we do, you will see that there is going to be serious food security in the country, because all the ingredients that help, that nurture these whole issues of food production have been depleted, completely depleted. So we have to rethink and start thinking of how to do things differently from the way we've done it in the past. I don't want to stay here and condemn what has been done in the past, but what we did in the past did not work. So what do? We have to devise some other ways of tackling the issues.
Dr. Jibono, thank you very much. I was going to ask you, one of the key points you highlighted in your response earlier was the fact that we are fixated on the ceremonials of tree planting. From your interactions, with various entities and groups, why have we not been able to move from the ceremony of tree planting to the actual details of dirtying our hands to plant more trees, to tend those trees, and then see, the environment actually going green?
See, 10, 12 years ago, we were given the worst part of Kano State in Dambata, where the communities were moving out of that area because of desert encroachment. So we decided to restore, just as a pilot project, to show how this whole thing can be done. We restored, not only that we stopped the encroachment of the desert, we restored the tree covers. And then in restoring the tree covers by building wall of trees, grazing fields returned. The water lakes here and there returned. The communities moved back to the area of Dambata. And you know something? The community built me a house for helping to bring about this massive change. So, and this is what we've been thinking of replicating in other parts of the north. So not only to contain the desert, but to restore life and stop migration. Migration is a serious issue. And by bringing this about, if I go to Dambata now, Dambata area of Kano State, people are harvesting mangoes and pawpaws and oranges for me because of what I didn't plant them, but the fact that we were able to restore some kind of vegetation. People have started farming in the community, and this was an area that suffered from serious degradation some 15, 20 years ago. So that is what we have to do. Make it belong, make whatever we are doing. That is to answer your question. Whatever we do, let it be a bottom-up arrangement. Involve the community, make it belong to them so that they can participate and become, because if we do the ceremonial like I mentioned, we have our emirs and our governors and our ministers come, and we have this massive ceremony of planting trees, and we go away. They see those things as belonging to the government. They don't care. They are not going to nurture. And if you're not there to nurture the trees and make them grow, what happens? Mortality will go from 10% into 80% in some cases. We have suffered 80% mortality in most of those states where millions of trees were planted on a ceremonial basis almost every year.
Thank you. And back in Abuja, Mr. Lozier, 2016 has been predicted by, of course, experts in the weather forecast to be the warmest year ever as a result of the impact of the strongest El Nino. What are the implications for us in Nigeria, and how do we begin to mitigate impact?
First of all, I so much appreciate the contribution of Dr. Jibuno, but honestly, we have had early warning, homegrown early warning, done here in Nigeria, championed by the Nigerian Meteorological Agency, working in close collaboration with NISA, Nigerian Hydrological Agency, and some agencies and parastatals under the Federal Ministry of Environment. But back to your question, we in NIMET are ready to release the expected rainfall trend for the year in the seasonal rainfall prediction by early March. I don't want to call the date so that it doesn't look like I'm using your program, in other words. And in it, we will show how the weather will be generally. But since we are running an El Nino year, and I have said earlier, some of the impacts of El Nino, as we are going to show Nigerians then, El Nino has already had a strong impact in Nigeria in the past 3 months in terms of the dry season. Fortunately, like the Honorable Minister said here, government is prepared, well prepared, because when government launched the dry season farming in November last year, we were a bit worried because we knew what El Nino does to the northern part of the country, where the dry season farming is most practiced. But we know government also went ahead to say that they are going to improve irrigation, which is very key to a strong impact on the agriculture following the ongoing El Nino. For this year and in other sectors, El Nino has strong impact in the health sector. In the opening program before we came in, the World Health Organization and the World Meteorological Organization have issued a statement just about a month ago on the current strong El Nino impact on health. And I want to tell Nigerians that we may not know, but let me say it now, that one of the effects of the strong El Nino is what we are seeing in the health sector, which is the Lassa fever. The Lassa fever is an environment-driven health issue. And we have seen from literature and from reports by experts in the WHO that the current Lassa fever effect in Nigeria is El Nino-driven. And so one of the effects of it, we are already seeing, the health issues concerning it. What we need to do is to increase advocacy, increase the awareness of the people. If people know that this is going to happen, then they have to do, the first aspect of mitigation and adaptation is early warning. You tell them that it's going to be a shorter length of season, for instance, for agriculture, even for energy production, hydropower production. The amount of rainfall we are projecting in the seasonal rainfall prediction is a key factor that those managing the dams that are producing electricity in the country need to have that information, because it will help them in planning. So the first panacea is information. And information that we produce in the early warning in NIMET has a long time, it has a good lead time, a minimum of 3 months. If those in policy planning and other issues are informed that in 3 months, 3 months advance information, that this is going to happen, that is going to happen, about the weather, rainfall, temperature, and other factors, then that will help them to plan very well.
Okay, well, Mr. Alozie, thank you very much. You spoke to the likely implication of warmer temperatures on the health of the people, as well as other environmental issues. We have a number of tweets that have come in already, and some of the tweets are actually speaking to these implications. One, for instance, from Noye Umahi. He writes as follows: Nigeria as a country needs to rise up fast against this. Now, the warmer climate is a major contributing factor to re-emerging diseases. That's the first part of the tweet. The second part writes that a good number of insects that are disease vectors thrive in warmer temperatures. This obviously is helping Zika virus spread.
Bright Irene tweets, if climate change is real, Nigerian government should be fully ready to fight the battle without negligence. And we also have another tweet coming in from Alim Yassini. And it tweets, the government should make it compulsory for every household to use cooking gas by bringing down the cost of the gas and give free cylinder.
All right, let's return to the Honorable Minister of State for Environment, Ibrahim Usman Jibri. You listened to Dr. Jibuno while he was advocating the bottom to the top approach in terms of greening our environment. He cited the example of Dambata. How, beyond policy formulation and then the ceremonials of tree planting, can the Ministry of Environment at the federal and then at the state levels drive community ownership of tree planting as well as environmental regeneration?
Well, thank you. I've actually listened to Dr. Jibno, and he made an interesting assertion. In reality, the issue of ceremonial days, I think we've gone past that. Why? Because environmental issues are daily occurrences. So you cannot wait for a year to do a ceremonial tree planting or all this day or all do that. Those are significant. They are meant to sensitize people. But what happened after the tree planting? Do you take care of the trees? How important are these trees to people? How important are they to the communities where you have done the tree planting campaign ceremony? What we want to do in the Ministry of Environment is to change the narrative and to ensure that knowledge are shared. Ours is a multidisciplinary approach because our activities cut across different MDAs. You need to cooperate. If you talk about smart agriculture, you need to cooperate with the Ministry of Agriculture. If you talk about the rivers drying off and its impact, you need to talk to the Ministry of Water Resources. So in that vein, we are actively looking at ways and collaborating with these MDAs so that whatever we think can be done better by a sister organization should be left to that organization while we give them the institutional support. Fortunately, by the end of December last year, after the Paris conference, the minister and I went on a tour of Nigeria in 7 days. We started from Lagos to see the coastal erosion and other things there, to Port Harcourt in the Niger Delta for the oil spillage, to places like Anambra and Imo for erosion control, and then went to Kano to look at the impact of industrial waste. Then across to Jigawa, to Yobe. In Yobe, we went across 7 local governments, and the principal target in those 7 local governments are the sand dunes, particularly in Maimalari and Yusufari areas of Yobe State. And like the doctor said here, the dunes are approaching at an alarming rate of half a kilometer in a year. And this is real. You need to see the dunes and to see the destruction they cause. They cover the oases where water is found in these dry lands. And so if you don't do something about it, definitely you are bound to reap the consequences of its effect. The Great Green Wall that has started working in these areas is looking at it from a holistic point of view, just not planting the trees. How important are these trees to people? And how much do these people own these trees? You need to make them understand that this is their own and they need to take care of it, and you need to train them to show them that they can get more from these trees than just planting and leaving them. And in the dry areas of the country, you must tend these trees. You must nurse them properly. How do you do that? You have to get water. Water is important, and therefore the issues of using boreholes, either they are solar powered or wind vane, is important, and that's what the Great Green Wall is doing in these areas. After sinking the borehole, you nurse the plant in the nursery, you distribute it to them and show them how to plant them and water them and take good care of them, so that at the end of the day, you tie it down to the economic activities. It's not just any tree. If you don't show them the importance of this tree, if you don't plant economic trees, chances are that if they are praised for fuel wood, they will cut the trees down. And apart from planting the trees, you need to look at special species. And that is what one arm of the ministry, again, is that's the Forestry Research Institute of Nigeria is researching on fast-growing trees. For instance, the Jatropha, which has a lot of economic viability. Before, you have them that grow just within 2 years. Now there are improved varieties that can grow within 6 months. And these are the ones that you are planting, and they have economic value, and they can also help to stabilize the soil. So the new approach is to look at the economic corridor behind the planting of these trees. By the time you plant and they are stable and they grow, they have something to fall out to economically, and that will increase their livelihood and make them more stable, and they know they own it.
I'm just wondering, Honorable Minister, it is the how that is the issue, because Dr. Osonwa also mentioned the point that, look, the diameter, if you like, of the Great Green Wall is about 15 kilometers, probably not more. And there will be a number of communities that are not covered by the Green Wall by the time it starts from the western part to the eastern part of the country across the Sahelian region. Now, those locations that are not covered by the Great Green Wall, what do they need to do? How do we get this into effect? That's why I asked about the role of the state governments. What kind of cooperation are you getting from them?
Well, it is true, it's just 15 kilometers deep, but 1,500 kilometers across the 11 states. Apart from that corridor, don't forget that there is this shelter belt that has been in place for a very long time, right from the 60s. If you go across the whole of these states, in Kano, in Jigawa, Sokoto, you see the shelter belts. Along the line, somewhere, somehow, these things are not adequately catered for. And because of the pressure of land, because of the need for fuel wood, these shelter beds are poached on. So we're looking at this angle from the Department of Desertification and Climate Change in the Ministry of Environment to ensure that the shelter belts are also taken good care of. That is where the State Ministry of Environment come into. Recently, we had a visit from Katsina, and there are other ministries of environment that are keen into this. We need to domesticate this program within the Ministry of Environment in the states, because they are closer to the people, and then they will also take it down to the local government level. It is in the local government areas that you have the people you can train to become forest rangers and take care of these trees that are economically viable. So we are including the ministries of environment for all the states to make sure that they are carried along with us. Apart from that, there is also the new program that is funded by the World Bank, the new MAV, Nigeria Erosion and Watershed Management Program. It takes care of not only the erosion that are prone to many parts of this country. Effects of climate change are many. You remove there are some that are man-made, man-induced. And because they are man-induced, it means they can be solved. If you do a lot of indiscriminate cutting of trees, particularly in the southern part of the country where you have a lot of forest, you realize that the forest cover in Nigeria, just like Dr. Jubuna said, is just about 5%. And the standard by the United Nations is about 25%. So we're way, way behind. But if you continue cutting the trees, you open the soil, you expose it, and the torrential rainfall that comes, particularly in this El Nino period, will take away the topsoil by way of erosion, and this has disastrous consequences. And then you know the gullies that are prominent in Agulu and Nanka in Anambra State. These are infamous areas. So we need the cooperations of the state government, and a lot of the state government are realizing the harmful effect of this and are keen in, and we're collaborating with them. And we think with this approach of active collaboration and sharing of knowledge and ideas, we can make a lot of difference.
We'll come back to know what the state government can do, because you've talked about the need for them to key in and collaborate, but how and in what form will this collaboration take, especially in states where we're having gully erosion and other parts of the country. But let's get to Mr. Alozie. Mr. Alozie, earlier on you talked about information as being key, the need for people to get the information that you're bringing out from NIMET. Now, how also do you ensure that the information you give out gets to the people who really need them, in this case, farmers, that's as regards to agricultural, production? How do you ensure that the farmers get the information, and not only getting the information, but also digesting them and applying them to, farming?
Yeah, thank you. What we have done last month, last month or early this month, was to go to the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and seek closer collaboration, because we realize that, one, it is also a limiting factor for NIMET in the dissemination of the various informations. We don't have that full capacity to ensure that the products that are very critical to operations in the farming cycle get to the users. So we have discussed with the Ministry of Agriculture. We are also talking to Federal Ministry of Information. Fortunately, the Honorable Minister of Information has accepted that it is important that NIMET's products, particularly the seasonal rainfall prediction, gets to the farmers. Let me say this, that the farmers on their own should also be hungry for this information, because a proper application of the advisories in the seasonal rainfall prediction is known to increase yield by as much as 30%. Indeed, it's 32%. So we want to help them, and we also want to work with the farmer groups, because if we can work better with the farmer groups, the group can extend, take the information further to the local communities. In 2016, NIMET is in discussion with the Federal Ministry of Agriculture to take the SRP, the seasonal rainfall prediction, and its advisories to the zoners, to the zones, to the 6 geopolitical zones, and also to translate it into local language. We envisage that if we go to a community, let me use my own state, in Imo State, Owerri, and begin to speak to the people who gather in Owerri, they will be more receptive. They will understand it better. The same thing applies to other sectors, other parts of the country. So we are, in 2016, much more serious about making sure that the forecast gets to the user than before.
Yes, because, I'm sure you're referring to the very large-scale farmers. But what about the small and medium-scale farmers, most of whom, are not literate enough to understand what you're saying? Isn't there a way that NIMET can take this information to them, maybe translate them into the languages that they can understand?
That's what I'm saying. In collaborating with the Federal Ministry of Information, we want to downscale, apart from, because it's a bulky document, it's for the entire country. We cannot take the whole forecast meant for the forecast meant for the whole country. Maybe when we go to Katsina State, for instance, we have the capacity to bring out the one that concerns only Katsina State and work with the information people who have the better capacity and resources to translate it into local language and make it get further. Remember, as in their own activities, I don't know them much, but I think they have information offices, even in the local government. And they can take this from us and move further down.
Well, Mr. Alozie, I think one of the key points that you just made now, but this probably also be useful for the Honorable Minister of State for Environment. Once your seasonal rainfall prediction is out, it should be the case that state governments should be enthusiastic enough to access the predictions that concern their particular locality. I mean, you wouldn't expect the Federal Ministry of Information to be deploying federal information centers to be passing down information. If something affects Sokoto or Delta, for instance, those state governments should be enthusiastic. Honorable Minister, I think that is a matter that you would like to pick up. Are you interested in it?
Yeah. But sorry, Honorable Minister.
Right. Let him just respond briefly, and then we sign off.
Yeah, I'm actually interested in that.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, about 3 weeks ago, we had a meeting with the Director General of the National Orientation Agency. And I know that the National Orientation Agency had about every local government in this country, they have offices, about 774 local government offices, which they directly link them up. And they have that issue you are talking about, local languages. The local language in a particular local government area will be important and is key towards disseminating information. So we intend to leverage on that, we at the Ministry of Environment, for whatever issue we want to discuss environmentally, to make them key in and help us disseminate information. That's the area of cooperation that I was talking about earlier on. So I think he made a good point, and we will support it, and we're already on the way towards that.
All right. Thank you very much, the Honorable Minister of State. Usman Jibril, we'll come back to you. Mr. Alozie, would like to thank you, General Manager of Climate Change at NIMET. Thank you for being with us on the program this morning.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Are you aware that the death percentage attributed to Lassa fever cases is currently put at 43.2%, a figure considered very high? Lassa fever, an acute viral illness characterized by high fever, muscle aches, mouth ulcers, and bleeding in the skin, is harbored by rats and spread to humans via the urine and droppings of rats. To prevent Lassa fever, avoid any exposure with rodents, rats, as well as food and objects contaminated with rat secretions and excretions. Report all suspected cases of Lassa fever immediately to the nearest healthcare institution. Help prevent Lassa fever. This message is from the Federal Government of
Welcome back, and it's Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. As you can see on the screen there, we're discussing climate change and the challenges that this poses for all of us in terms of the socio-economic cost. We have a number of guests at Sokoto. We still have Dr. Omar from our Sokoto Network Center. We also have Dr. Newton Jubuno from Benin Network Center. And with us here in the Abuja studios, we still have the Honorable Minister of State for Environment, as well as Dr. Osonwa, an environmentalist. We just signed off Mr. Alozie a moment ago, his General Manager, Climate Change Management. At this time, we're being joined by another guest on the program. He is Dr. Nasiru Idris. He's an Associate Professor of Environmental Planning in the Department of Geography, Nasarawa State University at Kefi. Dr. Idris, it's our pleasure that you've joined us on the conversation this morning.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, let's again come back to Abuja. Just before we go to Sokoto, Dr. Sonwa, in terms of disaster reduction, as a result of climate change, do you think at the state and local government levels, do you think they have the capacity, again, do they also have the capacity to stave off, food insecurity in the event of any disaster?
I think the capacity is there, but the question is it being harnessed? And that is the problem we have. A lot of times you have local governments are heavily indebted to state governments in terms of how they get their funding. A lot of the local governments are being run by transitional chairmen appointed by the governor. So they don't really have the flexibility to be innovative, to initiate new projects. But when you look at the state level, often what you find is states are always looking to the federal government for allocation, for solutions. And that overburdens the federal government in terms of resources and manpower. So I think we need to diffuse the way that we handle problems in Nigeria. And talking about remedial efforts, which is also, in this case, mitigation. Some projects can achieve both remediation and mitigation. One of the things that we have tried to do in the private sector in the past few months is I've been a part of a team where we're trying to see if we can take a holistic look at reforestation of Nigeria. As you know, Nigeria ranks #1 in terms of deforestation. We have already lost 90% of our virgin forests since independence, and these are official records we have. So the issue of reforestation is key because it helps our climate change profile. Trees sequester carbon, and when you have a lot of trees, your climate change profile becomes better. So one of the things we've done in the private sector, hoping to work in synergy with government at all levels, because you need that, is to come up with a reforestation project that looks at the problems to find innovative solutions. In that regard, we've traveled. We went to Ghana, looked at what they are doing. We went to Kenya, where they had a green belt movement led by Professor Mangari, looked at what they did. We went to Ethiopia, looked at some of the species, the plants that they're using that can survive in the desert. And we were very excited. There's one particular plant, a bamboo species, Abyssinica, that you can plant in the desert, doesn't need much water, and it never dies. Once you plant it, it continues to regrow, and that product can be used to make toothpicks in Nigeria. We don't have to import toothpicks again. So we have a number of economic trees, medicinal trees, food trees. So if you mix that pile and you use it as a tool for job creation, we can create 5 million jobs with this project that we have, and it can be funded by international funders. That's the most beautiful part of this. Nigeria does not have to spend its own money to do this because it's a climate change project. It's eligible for carbon credit funding. It's eligible for green climate funding. So what we need is that synergy with government. And I'm hoping that this new government, given the capable hands we have in the Ministry of Environment, that we can engage each other, public sector, private sector,
well, instead of again, I mean, you just spoke to this point, Dr. Osonwa. Instead of going to the federal government, why don't you take, I'm just saying this is by way of suggestion, take 1, 2, or 3 states and then focus on those states and then see what outcomes you get. Must you come to the Federal Ministry of Environment?
Well, the reason is when you're trying to do international projects that would attract international funding, that Nigeria doesn't have to invest money, you need to work with the federal government. That's the designated agency for those kinds of things. But as you said, the epicenter needs to be in the local communities. Precisely. Because they own this thing. And if we can use some of these strategically selected trees and plants, they will have economic viability. We don't have to be talking about sharing 5,000 to indigent and vulnerable people. They can become self-sustaining in a few years.
Let's take the first reaction from Dr. Nasiru Idris. Dr. Nasiru Idris, we're looking at mitigating the impacts now. In the event of any severe impact on our agricultural produce, do you see any effective storage and distributive mechanism to, mitigate impact?
Yes, definitely. If you look at issue of climate change is a change that is attributable directly or indirectly, then it alters the atmospheric composition of the earth, which leads to global warming. Therefore now, issue of storage and mitigation, you need to take measures. For example, some of the crops that have a significant yield, and storage facility is lacking. If you look at the olden days of silos, and Nigerian government needs to do something about it, because if climate change is occurring significantly, and if you look at the northern part of Nigeria, where you have desertification, which is land degradation, and drought, which accelerates desertification, definitely it has significant increase in terms of deficiency in yield. And the majority of the population of Nigeria, they rely on rain-fed agriculture, whereas which definitely it will affect their livelihood. So issue of now mitigation, which is minimal in developing country, which Nigeria belongs. Government needs to do something, and there are currently research, even in my institution, we are currently working on how to minimize this effect.
Okay, well, Dr. Idris, thank you. I will come back to you. I just wanted to go back to Dr. Umar at Sokoto Network Center. Dr. Umar, let's take a look at this. I mean, despite the obvious consequences of desertification, desert encroachment, and climate change, we still find that in the most heavily impacted parts of the country, in the Sahelian region, for instance, tree felling is still a way of life because people use wood for fuel. What has allowed this to persist? What has been the major challenge in a reorientation program to get them from using fuel as wood? Because even by the roadside, while you are traveling, I mean, you see stacks of firewood. And in the meantime, when you look at your right and your left, everywhere is desert.
Right. You see, the problem here is over a time period, we have been talking again and again on the need for the government to bring an alternative source of fuel wood or energy supplement sort of. That is to say, if the government does not want the common man to continue cutting trees and so on for fuel wood or whatever activity, then it should be able to bring an alternative source where people can now have, let's say, available gas or kerosene or whatever else it is, so that and it should be affordable to the common man, so that he can be able to buy it and use it as a source of energy for cooking. In the absence of this, it becomes extremely difficult, particularly in this part of the country, to actually stop the common man from cutting trees or shrubs and what have you for fuel wood. And just like other colleagues have said in the program, virtually any other project that the government wants to do in any part of the country, the bottom-up approach should definitely be used so that that sense of belonging that this project is theirs, yes, they know it's theirs, and these are the benefits they derive from, should be done. Otherwise, no matter how much money has been expended in bringing about these projects and so on, the actual end product, which means the objectives, won't be achieved. So I still feel if we want to mitigate this issue of either illegal logging in the name of maybe fuel wood or whatever else it is, definitely a government has to bring an alternative source for cooking whatever it is in this country. If not, here in the Northwest, particularly in Sokoto and other places where desertification has really come to stay, because that is what I always say has come to stay. despite the efforts being made either by the federal government, state governments, other international NGOs and what have you, honestly, unless something is bring about, that is what I'm saying is, unless the government is able to bring an alternative source of energy for the common man here, the likelihood of stopping our people from cutting trees and so on is not likely to be achieved.
Just before we get to Benin, Honorable Minister, earlier on, Dr. Nasir Idris raised the issue of inadequate silos, for storage of agricultural produce. That's one. What's government doing about that? Now, is government also not just talking about it, but is government also working at alternative source for fuel wood?
Yes, government is actually doing something in that respect. On the issue of silos, this is exclusively within the purview of the Federal Ministry of Agriculture. And I know our colleagues there are working assiduously to address these issues. And we are collaborating with them in such a way that they will take full responsibility and do what is expected. They are not just going to start building silos all over the country. They need to collaborate with the state ministries of agriculture, and they are doing that. On the second aspect of fuel wood, it is a very serious problem. Whether we like it or not, the population we had in the 60s is far, far much lower than what we have now. So there is the issue of population pressure on land. And the more you have people, the more you need food, the more you need fuel wood. Until you find a way of getting more efficient way of production of this fuel wood, you can't stop the cutting of the wood, just like Dr. Dangasabe said from Sokoto. We have alternative to that. We burn a lot of gas in the Niger Delta area where these petroleum resources are found. But what's happening is that we have not given sufficient incentive to the gas flaring companies in such a way that they find it much cheaper to burn the gas away than to bottle it and process it. But I know my colleague, the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, is working towards getting the regulation that will compel the oil companies to stop the flaring of gas. And we know its impact also on the environment. So the Minister of Petroleum Resources is working towards that to ensure that the oil companies are brought in line in such a way that they will stop the flaring of the gas in the next 5-10 years, so that that gas can be bottled and be used as an alternative source of fuel. And that way it can lead to the minimal or reduction of the cutting of the wood, which is also detrimental to the environment.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Of course, we know there have been all kinds of programs and schemes, either for kerosene or for gas and so on and so forth. We just hope that the beneficiaries will be multiplied and then reduce the impact. Let's go back to Dr. Newton Jibuno at our Benin Network Center. Dr. Jibuno, just to ride on the point you made about encouraging citizen and community ownership of a greening project. Is there something that is missing in our education curriculum or even in our socialization process that ensures that we have, as it were, very little regard for trees? I mean, I'm sure if there's a tree standing in front of a house and somebody wants to do something, say, okay, just cut the tree down. What do we need to do in terms of, reordering our curriculum around nature study?
Thank you very much. At this stage, let me commend the Honorable Minister's, let me call it adventurous trip across the whole country not too long ago. That went a long way towards sensitizing the communities, the various communities that they visited. I'm aware of that. I keep going back to Dambata in Kano State, where we carried out a pilot project. In this project, what we did was to involve the school children, mainly secondary school and some colleges of technology students, and siting the wall of trees around their compounds. And in the process, imbibing the whole issue of environment, the whole issue of climate change into their curriculum. And you know, once you involve school children, you are, by implication, involving their parents. And that's the issue I'd like us to look into. Mothers and sisters should become part of this whole thing. In doing this, we were able to get the schools to be part of nurturing those trees. We got the school as an incentive. In some schools, we gave them boreholes or wells, which they used in, and you can imagine in a school where there was nothing like a borehole or nothing like a well, and suddenly you give them that. It's a major incentive. And by educating the school children, you are, by, like I said, educating their parents. Women became part of the whole process of nurturing. And not just nurturing, they were educated on the implication, on the issues of medication. The Honorable Minister talked about, and my friend from Sokoto also talked about, the whole issue of chopping down trees. The trees we managed to grow in the Dambata area, some of them form part of the Shelter Belt project. We have trained communities to harvest just the branches of those trees. Because, like was mentioned, there is no way you can stop the people from fuel energy, using wood for energy. In fact, I know communities that will not eat any food that is not produced from a firewood. So if and when you go on doing that, you are educating the children, you are educating their parents, and the whole community becomes aware of the need. Because, like I said earlier on, why did they build me a house in Dambata? Because I was living in a tent. The community, after seeing what we have managed to restore, said, no, you can't go on living in a tent. We build you a house. In fact, when the house was commissioned, the then Emir of Kano came with the British High Commission because they gave us part of the money we used in implementing the project. So the whole community have become aware, have been educated over the issue of climate change and the need to do something because they have seen the changes that this whole thing is bringing about to the community. That's why I keep going back to that bottom-up arrangement. In addition to all those that we have done, we did start also a cottage industry where they can harvest their mangoes and their oranges and turn them into juice. So by doing that, you are also providing employment industry for the community. The students, all the way to youth corpers, became involved. So by this whole synthesization arrangement, you are adding a lot to the whole mitigation arrangement.
All right, Dr. Newton Jibuno, a very well-known environmentalist, would like to thank you for joining us from our Benin Network Center. And I do hope you have a CFO for the building that was constructed for you at Dambata. CFO, you know, or a right of occupancy. All right, well, that's Dr. Jibuno there from Benin Network Center. Claire, we have some tweets in already. I would like to take one or two of them.
Of course, we begin with Alim Jassini, and he tweets, government should make it a law that anyone caught cutting down a tree must plant 20 trees and take care of it for at least 5 years.
All right, that's right. That's a good one there from him. But he also writes the second leg of that tweet. This one is from Jeku Ona. It says, what's the government doing with regard to recycling of polythene materials like sachet water bags as they contribute, according to him, to climate change?
All right, Kingsley Jeku also tweets, we should concentrate on reducing tree felling for firewood by researching on biogas for cooking as tree planting has failed.
Okay, let's go over now to our Sokoto Network Center. I would like to thank Dr. Adana Sabe Umar, who joined us from Sokoto. Thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you.
We do Hope that, as you said, that the desert has come to stay, that you fight the desert and push it back to the Sahara. Okay.
Yes, we still have some other tweets. This one is from Ibrahim Tudu. Ibrahim says, more actions are needed on climate change in states where impact is heavy. Responses by states on enlightenment are inadequate.
Okay, well, let's go over now to Dr. Nasiru Idris, who's with us here in the Abuja studios. Dr. Idris, what challenge is there in terms of reorientation of people who still use firewood, as it were, for domestic purposes? How can we begin to get that reorientation? I mean, kerosene is available, probably it's expensive. Gas and small cylinders are also available. Gas cylinders are also available. What is the challenge in terms of people resistance?
Okay, thank you very much. First and foremost, we have to look at poverty and environmental degradation. They work hand in hand. Why? Because as long as you are poor, the only available resource you have is the natural environment. Therefore, you need to tap. Therefore, government needs to go back to awareness right from kindergarten. That's right from primary school, to introduce environmental science courses that will give the community, parents, everybody awareness on the impact and the effect of climate change, which whereas leads to so many of the environmental disasters. For example, deforestation leads to so many disasters, e.g. flooding. It exposes the land, therefore leads to so many erosions and other aspects. Therefore, government needs to go back and reintroduce these courses so that it will give awareness, because the community, most of them are not even aware of the particular environmental disaster that hampers their own livelihood, which is key. This is very, very vital.
Right here, Dr. Nasri Idris, Associate Professor of Environmental Planning, Department of Geography, Sarawak State.
Supreme Court Justice